Hello, I'm male feminist Anders Bloom, and because all lives matter here at Thorin's channel, I give you a big welcome.
Astralis win the FACEIT Major London. So 4 of their members, all of them except Magisk, become 2-time major winners, obviously winning the E-League Major Atlanta back in early 2017. They came close at PGL Krakow with that lineup. They lost to Gambit, who went on to win the major in the semi-finals in quite a close third map. But they come through, they win. Magisk himself, the new member, becomes a major champion for the first time. We think back to the major that Astralis won. That was the one where he had that godlike performance on Cobblestone against Virtus.pro in a 3-map series. But in the end, Virtus.pro went through. We were able to meet Astralis in the final. And then I guess Denmark got its revenge. So Astralis are the champions, and they did it in dominant fashion. I mean, first of all, just look on the surface level. In the playoffs, they beat the number 4 ranked team in the world, FaZe Clan, a team which its core was a team that will be considered a top 10 team of all time in terms of titles, accomplishments, players that were contained in it. Just got Olofmeister back in the lineup, but a few events ago, played a whole bunch of LANs with them now. Then in the semi-finals, they played against number 3 ranked team in the world, Team Liquid, a team that even a number of analysts, people on the desk, were picking to win. The hype was that they were so good. They hadn't been weakened by going to DreamHack Stockholm. They came in with a much stronger map pool, which they absolutely did. They looked fabulous in the tournament to that point, basically undefeated. Didn't matter, Astralis beat them as well. In the final, they played the number 2 ranked team in the world, Na'Vi, a team that had already beaten them to deny them the title at ESL1 Cologne in that semi-final there. A team that had won a few events in recent history. In fact, FaZe Clan also one of the champions of the year. Didn't matter, Astralis again won. They won all 3 of these series against the best ranked teams in the world. 2-0, winning each time with their opponent's map pick as well. Never even going to a third map pick. Over the tournament, including week 1, which is technically part of the major, they played 14 maps. They won 12 of the 14 maps, and the only 2 losses were best of ones, which both went to overtime. The theme of Astralis' time together is quite fitting to this dominant performance that they had, because they're a team that won 4 titles. They were top 4 every single tournament except the first. When they lost to every tournament except the first, it was always to the team that went on to win the final. So in some of the ones when they finished top 4, they might actually have been the second best team there. They have been an incredibly tough team to beat. Most opponents do not even get double digits in each map against Astralis. So winning this major, added to the other titles, added to the dominance of how they won those titles, added to how rarely they lose, added to all the top 4s, to the dominance across the map pool, to what the eye test tells you, to the individual players and how they fit together, how they've innovated, revitalized, rethought Counter-Strike itself. Yes, this cements an era for Astralis. The age of Astralis, as I will dub it. They won the major. They've won other big titles, the biggest of the year. They've had consistent top finishes. They've beaten every possible opponent. They have no true rivals. They are the team of the era. You look at the strengths of this squad. Their firepower, very evenly distributed. They have Device, this fabulous mobile AWPer who's very efficient with how he does it, knows exactly when to save, stays within his limits but still puts up MVP level numbers. You have Dupree, arguably the best entry player in the world, one of the all-time greats at that position. Fabulous ability to break through when Astralis needs a particular round and need to get an early kill or 2 to break a site open. Then you have Greb, on the one hand, masterminding game leader, on the other, fabulous entry player himself, someone fragging way above the level you'd expect, and even winning the odd clutch. Magisk is forgotten in the mix of all this. This is a guy who puts up really strong numbers, really nice ADR, plays a more passive style, very much a position player on CT side, but very, very good at doing so. And when you don't even need him to be one of the stars of your team, or at least not every single game, he's massively overqualified to do that in a team of this quality. And a guy with a bit of nous about him, a bit of intelligence that's been able to fit into the squad. Then who have you got left? Oh, Just Zipnik's probably the best support player of all time, perhaps even the best clutch player in the entire world right now. And that's your 5th player. Are you fucking kidding me? You look at the team play of this squad, it's amazing. The CT setups are absolutely bonkers. The way they always seemingly have crossfires or someone who's holding the off angle to where someone would want to peek into you. Then you look on the terrorist side, that methodical, slow-paced punish style where you use utility, you use two-man setups, you double peek onto areas so that even if an opponent starts fighting you, even if an opponent kills you, he's immediately traded. Sometimes he doesn't even get to trade you. I was watching Electronics' point of view, a bunch of those rounds on CT side of Nuke. The guy never got a fucking fair chance at a shot half the time. It was so frustrating to watch from his perspective, but so fabulously executed by the Astralis guys. And anyone who thinks that's easy and you could get any team and do that, you are badly mistaken. FaZe Clan has perhaps the most raw firepower maybe ever assembled in CSGO, and they would be a much worse team if they attempted that style of play. It wouldn't work for them. They in no way could execute or pull it off, and they would actually have worse results than with the sort of run and gun, more loose style that they employ now. That's the interesting thing about Counter-Strike. You've got to have a style that suits you and your personnel. There is no best style. Sure, on paper, this style from Astralis might look the best, but it won't be for other teams. Then you consider, how tough is it to ever string rounds together against Astralis? They're incredible at building their economy, so they're never having to do those saves, because when they do the full 2 saves and they will play low econ with just a pistol and a smoke grenade or a flash. Then they're unbelievable at breaking economy. Like, by the time we got to this major, they were one of the best teams in the entire world at fucking force buying. They were so phenomenal these last few months. So, amazing CT side. Some of the best T sides in the entire game, notably on Nuke, where they won 18 games in a row, never been beaten on that particular map on LAN. Then you consider they have amazing force buys. They're also the best pure gun round team. They're amazing at saving to keep the gun round economy very strong. Then you go to the map pool. Is there anywhere where we can at least play them? Is there an opponent that can play them? No, impossible map pool. The only map they don't play is Cash, a map that they used to be pretty decent on when forced to play it with the old lineup. Every other map, literally every other map in the map pool, is like 65% or higher win rate. Some of them 80%. They can play all these maps. Even a map like Train, they weren't playing much. People tried it against them. Yeah, they won all 3 of those games in the last few months. There is no way you can go in the map pool. They are unbelievably good. Hence why they win their opponent's map. Hence why it's so hard to ever beat them. Hence why something like 1 map in the entire time they've been together, I think it's since the since like Katowice, I believe. Since then, there's only been 1 map where they didn't get double digits themselves. That was like 7 months ago. This is outrageous stuff. And they've done all of this in terms of the championships in a 6-month span. That's how fucking insanely dominant this team. I mean, at this point in time, the real what's if of 2018 is what would have happened if Kirby had just signed that contract, because Astralis seemingly wouldn't have been as good. Even if they had been the best, it'd have been an incredibly competitive year with Mouse Sports and Team Liquid and Na'Vi and FaZe. Tournament to tournament to tournament. You could have had different champions. You could have shared all the titles very evenly. This major would have been wide open. You'd have even had teams like NIP coming in late, Fnatic earlier on able to do some things. This would have been a really wide open, crazy, wacky year. Instead, one team's just dominated the majority of it as a team, and then individually you've had Simple be a god the entire year and pretty much the best player. So it's actually been a year of almost tyrannical, totalitarian dominance of the scene by an individual and by a group. Obviously in this final, sadly, Simple, who Astralis is the team he performs the worst against out of all the top teams, had a kind of a nightmare of a final, didn't look particularly good, but you know what? That is what Astralis does to teams, and that is what they do to star players as well, quite frankly. Very few star players who can hang with these guys. Then you've got to consider, think of the history that this line of players has had. So the core, we're particularly thinking of Device and Dupree here, the double D combination, the 2 young stars that way back in the Copenhagen Wolves day, you could see these guys are going to be very good players going on, right? Device was labelled as a choker, guy who couldn't perform, always fell apart in the big game. He still occasionally does that. Most of the time, not the case though. You look at most of their big wins this year, he's the MVP. You look statistically, he's the guy with the best numbers. You look even in this final here, didn't have to do very much, but did his job entirely. They win the final. Now he's got 2 major titles under his belt. It's all well and good people talking mad shit the last few years. This boy's leapfrogging ahead of a bunch of those guys. There's plenty of legendary names who'd be in a top 10 all-time list of players for CSGO that Device has more titles than. In fact, you'd be quick at just listing the players with more titles than he has in his career in terms of both normal titles and major titles now. Then you look at Dupree. This is a guy who, along with Device, seemingly had unfulfilled potential. Also had some issues in big games. But the 2 of them stuck together. And this is a lesson lesson for a team like the best example right now has got to be Team Liquid. If you're Elysian Twists or you're NAF and Twists, whichever combination, stay together. Find a way to figure out these problems. Because you know what? These guys were sticking together and they were losing again and again to all the great teams in 2014 and then in the big majors in 2015. And then in 2016, things just went really badly for them and they had their down year. They stuck together. They now have more major titles than those NIP players who at the time held it over them. They have more major titles than the Virtus Pro players who, again, held it over them in a lot of matches. They have more major titles than the Very Game squad that always took care of them. None of these things matter now at the end of the story for some of those teams and players because who had their last laugh, right? They turned their whole narrative around. Yes, they were losers. They were chokers. They were people who didn't live up to their potential. But now they have exceeded their potential at this point in time. And when you're in God mode and you're at the peak of your game, the titles come fast and thick and you can catch up real quick. So if you're Team Liquid, you keep that in mind. If you're Simple and Electronic, you find a way to stay together, knowing that we've got the pieces here to win. Let's get the other pieces around us. Let's develop our mindset. Let's do the last few things that set us in place to be the guys winning major after major, title after title, top 4 after top 4, final after final, and all of a sudden, no one gives a fuck that we didn't win 2 years ago. All of a sudden, we're the best in the world, and that's what the Astralis guys have done. Then you look at someone like Zipnix, a model professional for like half a decade now. Someone who could have been a lesser talent on a North, on what would now be a Heroic or an Optic. Instead, elected to change his whole role, become this mad support player who plays just a very concise, very clean game, and in doing so, become one of the most overqualified, most valuable support/role players to ever play a version of Counter-Strike. And thus, what do you know? His team's the one that's like starting to top the charts in terms of top 4 placings, won tons of trophies, now won 2 majors together. And that's how he did it from his part. Then you consider Magisk, a guy who looked phenomenal towards the end of 2016, looked like he was going to be one of the top 10 players for years to come, then had his issues in 2017, eventually got kicked from North to some degree for warranted reasons, quite frankly. It wasn't working out for both sets. Went through the hard times with Optic where it didn't look like he resurrected his career, got a chance out of nowhere to come into Astralis last minute and has played phenomenally, done his job to a very high level, seemingly overcome any immaturity or personality issues that he may have had, become a very valuable asset, and is now a major champion. Then you consider finally the in-game leader, Glaive. This is a guy who was lost in the wilderness for years. No one gave a fuck about this guy. No one was going to give him a chance in a top team again. His days were done. His rep was ruined. And then he came back. And he got one crack at Astralis because Carrigan hadn't been able to get it done and win a major. And what do you know? He's won 2 majors. He's won dozens of, well, it hasn't been dozens, that's an exaggeration. He's won many trophies. He's been in many finals. He's had dozens of top 4s. He's now put together 2 of the greatest lineups of all time in terms of consistency, performance. This guy's done some amazing shit. And most people now would hail him as the best in-game leader in CSGO, the best in-game leader in the world, maybe the best in-game leader ever when you consider the fragging he's doing these last few months. This was a team who used to choke. This is a team who would break in the big moment. Well, you know what? I can't say they've gotten over all those issues. You get them into a tough game. You get them into a third map. You put them under tight situations of overtime or when a player's playing badly. You play a really messy game against them. They can break. Problem is, doing that part is the incredibly hard part now. It's not getting them there and then beating them that's the hard part. It's getting them to the point where you can then have them under pressure. Because you can't do that when they don't let the game get close. You can't do that when they just front run like the best front runners we've ever seen. You can't do that when they dominate the game economically. And even when you win a round, you're having to spend all your money and sometimes not even have a full buy on some of your team. Meanwhile, they're doing an amazing job saving. They're doing an amazing job keeping their AWP alive. They're doing an amazing job winning rounds without anyone from their team dying. Then they've got the impossible map pool, meaning you can never truly have an edge in a series or feel entirely comfortable or even feel comfortable on your map against them. And so when you lose their map, you have this inevitability in your mind like Navi had here, that like they blew us out on our map pick, on their map pick, and on our map pick, well, they're good on it as well, and they're doing well early on in it, and so maybe this isn't our day. That's how, as a team that in theory is psychologically not the strongest, they weren't outright weak, they never lost every time, they would lose to the very psychologically strong teams, such as the SK Gamings of the world. But that's how a team that doesn't have that as a strength counteracts it entirely by working on a different weakness and never letting the game get to that point where someone can pressure you and break you. So an amazing accomplishment, well deserved, fantastic narrative closure to the storyline. Obviously this team can keep going. They could win many more titles. They could win the next major. Anything could happen. Or maybe a team's already in our midst that's going to defeat them. Maybe the team that's going to do the next roster move is the one that will topple them. Maybe we'll get a fantastic competitive era between different teams, and FaZe and MIBR will come online and an IP will fix things and Fnatic will get the shit. Who knows? It could go anywhere. Maybe Team Liquid has that one player who goes up 10% level and all of a sudden they're winning titles and it's back and forth. But for this moment belongs to Astralis. They are the major champions and right now they're gunning for the best team to ever play Counter-Strike. This video was kindly supported by Gardner Wilson, Dean Tanglis, Alex Adams, Eddie Wingfors, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, godawfulwasteofspace, Kyla Harris, Travis Greb, James Harding, Daniel Yordanov, VeXii, Robert Baxter, and a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest to appear in my content? Do you want to ask me a question in my monthly AMA? Do you want teasers for upcoming content and guests? Want to take part in a discussion about esports with me? Put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today. Link in the description box.